Hello students, welcome to this class where we are going through important current affairs Indian economy topics. Okay, so those topics will be covered by important newspapers like the Hindu, the Business Line, the Economic Times, Business Standard, etc. But we are covering only those important topics which are significant from the civil services examination angle. And in this class we are going through 4 topics. Okay, the first one is equalization levy and the problems for the startups. The second one is India-US trade discussions, and both countries agreed to continue those trade discussions. The third one is Air India disinvestment, and the fourth one is the report that core industries have registered a very low growth during June this month. Okay, so these are the 4 important topics that we have identified on this day from various newspapers including the Hindu. The first topic, that is the equalization levy, that is a tax, okay, and the problem for startups. So this topic says that the government has introduced an equalization levy in 2016, okay, in the 2016 budget on companies like Google, okay, mainly the digital companies who are providing some online services in India, okay, and they are taking away that income to foreign countries. So to counter that, the government has introduced an equalization levy, and this levy has created a problem for the startups in India. We will see how that issue goes. What is equalization levy? The government in 2016 budget imposed a tax or a levy on online advertising and some other online services that are available from entities which do not have a permanent establishment in India. So remember, this levy or a tax, okay, that is imposed on companies that are providing online services in India but that have no permanent establishment or no offices in India. Okay, remember, when those companies doesn't have an office in India, they need not pay a tax in India. Google is the major online advertisement service as it runs the Google AdSense, and Google's AdSense doesn't have a permanent establishment in India. So in this case, when the Google is earning revenue from India through its AdSense, we people or companies will be providing money to Google for providing the advertisements and services. That is a main issue here. The equalization levy is a follow-up of the OECD countries' efforts to tax overseas digital companies who are earning income domestically by providing digital services. Okay, so this levy has a root in the OECD effort. OECD tried to impose tax on companies, okay, so which are earning an income domestically but taking away this income to their own home countries. So OECD has made such an effort. That means an effort to tax the income of such digital companies. Companies usually shift this income to tax havens or low tax destinations to avoid tax. Okay, so here comes the concept of tax avoidance. The OECD has a BEPS, base erosion and profit shifting action plan, okay, to tackle the problem of tax avoidance, especially that related with digital companies. So that is an important project of the OECD. Okay, that project is called base erosion and profit shifting. Basically, it is a project aimed to reduce or eliminate the problem of tax avoidance. And now we are seeing a basic concept. What is tax avoidance? Tax avoidance is a practice where companies not paying taxes by exploiting the loopholes in tax laws by arranging their business accordingly. So basically, tax avoidance is a practice adopted by companies. They will be exploiting loopholes in the existing tax laws. Then we have to see what is the BEP's action plan. The OECD prepared an action plan against the tax avoidance strategy under the BEPS. Okay, in its first BEPS action plan, that is titled as Addressing Tax Challenges in a Digital Economy. Remember the title itself, there are a lot of challenges for the tax from the taxation front when you are taxing the digital economy and the digital services. So in its first BEPS action plan, Addressing Tax Challenges in Digital Economy, OECD proposed methods to overcome tax challenges that digital economy brings. And we will see what are the methods followed by or methods adopted by OECD under this BEPS action plan. This included withholding tax on certain types of digital transactions and equalization levy. Okay, so the Methods include first, withholding tax, and second, an equalization levy. Several countries then launched taxes on digital income, created domestically but transferred to other destinations. So here we will see what is withholding tax. Withholding tax is an obligation on the payer, to withhold tax at the time of making payment under specified head such as rent, commission, salary, professional services, contracts, capital gains, etc. The obligation to withhold and pay tax is with the person or entity who gives the payment to the beneficiary. The content of the withholding tax, that is described in the second sentence. Remember, it is an obligation. Withholding tax is not a particular tax. You can withhold any tax if you are a payer of any income or a payment to some other individual or entities. If you are making a payment to some other entities or an individual, you have to withhold a tax for that income. And you have to make the payment, this tax payment, to the government. So we have seen that several countries have imposed taxes on digital services, and those companies which are not paying any tax here but taking away the income to some other countries. The first such attempt was made by UK. UK tried to impose a tax on Google when Google earned tremendous revenue in the UK and shifted those income to Luxembourg without paying any tax in UK. So since one such attempt was made by the UK against Google, this tax became known as Google tax. So that is the story behind the name of Google tax. And what is Google tax? Google tax refer to anti-avoidance provisions, especially tax measures that are passed by various countries, not just UK, to deal with profits or royalties that have been diverted to other jurisdictions with lower or nil rates. So when digital companies are transferring income created in India to some other locations, India can impose a tax on such transfer of income, and any such tax can be generically called as Google tax. So Google tax just indicate a name. It is not a tax on Google actually. And UK has introduced diverted profit tax. That is a tax of 25% on profit generated in Britain. If digital companies are creating income in Britain, they have to pay a tax of 25% in the sense that they are diverting their profit to some other location. So the name of that tax was not Google tax but diverted profit tax, but the public called it as Google tax. This tax is often named as Google tax. And similarly, in Argentina, another country, a turnover tax of 3% was introduced by Argentina on offshore foreign companies providing e-services. Any foreign companies providing e-service in Argentina have to pay a tax of 3%. So Argentina followed the footsteps of UK. And now we are coming to see what measures are adopted in India against companies which are providing online service in India but without paying any tax in India. Tax efforts in India on overseas companies earning from online services. In 2015, that was the first attempt or the initiative taken by the government of India. In 2015, government has set up a committee on taxation of e-commerce. Following the OECD's BEPS action plan model, the committee proposed an equalization levy on 12 digital services. Remember, the company following the OECD action plan, it has proposed an equalization levy on 12 digital services. So the government in 2016 budget imposed a tax or levy on online advertising and some other online services on companies which do not have a permanent establishment in India. Remember, companies which do not have a permanent establishment in India. If a company, foreign company, is having a permanent establishment in India, it may have a residence in India. So that company should pay tax in India. But since this type of offshore companies who are providing online service in India doesn't have any permanent establishment in India, they need not pay tax in India. So that is a problem. Now, what is a permanent establishment? This is another concept that we have to understand from the examination angle. Permanent establishment implies a foreign firm doing business in India by operating a dedicated office. So a foreign firm operating in India is starting a dedicated office for its working. That is called permanent establishment. Permanent establishment implies a fixed place of business through which the business of an enterprise is wholly or partly carried on. Such a fixed place of business can be a branch office, a place of management, a factory, a warehouse, a workshop, etc. So, if a company has a permanent establishment in India, it has to pay tax in India. So, that is the significance of a permanent establishment. So, companies advertising with Google. We are coming to the equalization levy and it's working in India. Okay. So, companies advertising with Google how to bear the burden of the equalization levy. Actually, even if the government has imposed the levy of 6%, okay, the government has introduced this levy of 6% on Google advertisements. Okay, that was one of the services on which the levy has been introduced, levy has been made. So, even if the tax has to be paid by Google, Google will collect those tax from the advertisers. Okay, so that is the issue here. So companies advertising with Google have to bear the burden of the equalization levy. The levy is often nicknamed as Google tax. The levy came to effect on June 1, 2016 after a budgetary proposal. So that is the history of equalization levy in India and what is the connection between startup and this equalization levy. So startups are giving tremendous advertisement about their business through online. Okay, so they may be giving advertisements to Google. Here, the burden of equalization levy ultimately falls on startups who are providing the advertisement cost to Google. Startups spend almost 40% of their budget on online ads according to industry sources. So here comes the issue. Before 2016, there was no service tax and no equalization fee on online ads. Now there is a 15% service tax and a 6% equalization levy. So the advertisement cost for startups increased. That hurts startups. That is why startups are demanding that this equalization levy should be withdrawn. And now we are coming to the terms you have to go through. Okay, the basic concept you have to go through when you are covering this topic. The first one is equalization levy or Google tax. Second one is permanent establishment. Third one is BEPS project. Fourth one is tax avoidance. And lastly, the concept of withholding tax.